Hello, welcome back to another Plat Chat Valorant First Strike preview video. This time we're going to be tackling Team Envy, who are a really interesting team and have recently made some big changes as well. So since the last time we've seen them, they're going to be running a bit of a different roster. So you'll have to take what we say here with a bit of a pinch of salt, because we're not talking about the exact same five-man team. They'll probably have the same kind of theme, but there's going to be some changes in terms of the roles that they play and this kind of stuff. But we'll give you a bit of a breakdown on why you should be a fan of this team. And I've got Jonathan Reinforced Larson here with me, who is dropping by to give his thoughts on Envy. How you doing, Johnny? And why should people be a big fan of Envy?
I thought you were going to ask, why should people be a fan of me? And I thought the answer was pretty obvious, from the bat. But with Envy, it's a bit of a shame, honestly, because remembering Pop Flash, which was their most recent tournament, this was one of the more put together teams. They had like a structure to it, and they even had a bit of an identity, which we'll go over, in this video. But they had that structure going, and as you said, they made some player adjustments, after that tournament as well. So this is a team that I think had a really good structure going, but now they've shaken up their entire team going into First Strike as well. They added the Crashies and Food, who left T1 following some dramatic changes over there, and now got rid of Calypso and Aegis. So some nice, interesting player adjustments on this pretty well-structured team that are obviously going to shake up their performances moving forward.
Yeah, I like your setup of them there, because they were steadily improving over time as well. And this Pop Flash tournament that I've got up on the screen right now, they made it to the finals to face against Sentinels. This is a team that was previously hanging around kind of the 5th to 8th. They would make some quarters. They would do all right. They looked like they had a little bit of promise, a couple of players that were pretty good. And then in this tournament, when the path was kind of cleared for them, and I say cleared for them, but they managed to knock out Cloud9 as well. So they did half of the heavy lifting themselves. They got to a great position where they're able to make it to the finals. The best tournament showing they've ever had. They looked great here. Okay, they're not really able to take it in the grand final. They lose 3-0 to Envy, but they put up a good showing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is absolutely an argument to be made here about the fact that they had a relatively easy road to the grand finals when you look at this tournament in review, because they were in a group with T1 and it was with Immortals and Sentinels, right? So Sentinels is obviously going to be the favorite to win Group B, in which they were put, but then Immortals, they had some connectivity issue with Dicey, who was their star player at the time, and then T1 as well, disappointing, bringing in EU as well to do some replacements there. So Team Envy, they qualify from Group B, right? But then they go into the bracket, and that is where they lose to Cloud9 in the upper bracket quarterfinals. But then they beat Dignitas, and then they actually beat Cloud9 in the lower bracket final to make it to the grand finals. Yeah. So I think it is actually a valid argument to say that Envy at the time, they had a relatively easy road to grand finals. But again, they were a pretty structured and well put together team at the time. I like what they were doing with FNS shot calling on this team as well, because when we're in a Valorant scene that is relatively early stages, there's a lot of teams, up and coming teams, there's a lot of player movements being made as well, and people trying to figure out their play style, etc. This was a team that actually had some nice strategies on split. They are very well known for having really good statistics on split and having good strategies over there. They had their roles figured out. I think that everyone on this team actually performed quite well, and especially in Pop Flash as well. Some people even surprised. I think that Mume and Caboose had some of their best performances so far on this team in this tournament. So they were steadily rising, Sideshow, in this tournament. And then do we want to go to the player changes this team made? Because, oh boy, it comes out of nowhere, really.
It really did. It came out of absolutely nowhere. I mean, this team's made like these steady improvements. They've made Split their home map, where they have a 75% win rate. They are probably the second best team in NA on Split, behind Sentinels. And they're at like this top level. They've got this pocket pick map where no one else really plays it. And then they've got Caboose really stepping up. Calypso has always been, in my mind, their best player. Mame can give them some moments here and there. And then they just fucking blow it up.
One way to put it,
They really did blow it up. And they've never really announced great reasons why. And it gets sticky when we're talking about this too, because there was never a reason given for why Calypso was released from the team. The timing of it was the same time when other people were getting removed from teams due to match-fixing allegations in MDL. But no one has ever come out and publicly said that Calypso was involved in that kind of stuff. And as of recording this video, the ESIC report on that MDL match-fixing scandal has not come out. It's like 2 weeks late and it hasn't come out. So it's still a bit of a mystery, but very suspicious timing and circumstances as to why Calypso was dropped. They did say that Akis, they just prioritized other people in the team.
Yeah, and I think that is justifiable, because when you look at Akis statistically, he was arguably the worst performing player on the team. You know, he was playing that Sage role to kick things off, and then later transitioned into like a smoker kind of role, but it didn't really work out. And I think there's actually an argument to replace him in the first place.
Yeah.
But Calypso is the big one here when we talk about Envy, because Calypso, in my mind, he was the identity of this Envy team before players like Caboose stepped up and Mumei stepped up on the Jett as well with the op, because Calypso was known as one of the best omens in North America, really. You know, we can bring up other players, but in my mind, Calypso was the identity of this team, because no one had really, emerged as this top tier omen as of yet, but Calypso certainly was in that conversation in North America, especially. Hello, Stream Deck.
Fucking Lord, what is this? Get out of here. Remind me later. I don't care about that update to Stream Deck.
Yeah, so Calypso, he was this identity, and as you mentioned as well, you argue that he was probably the best player on this team, right? So they get rid of him, they don't really give us a reasoning, and it's a miss of this match-fixing investigation into MDL. Obviously, do not want to put that tag on him, because we have no information, and that is an awful thing to do, right, if you don't have access to that kind of information. But now instead, replacing one of their star players, is that fair to say star players? I mean, I don't know if he's really a star player, but one of their top players.
One of their top
players, right? Yeah, the identity behind this team. And they bring in Food and Crashies from T1. And I believe it was just a pickup at this time. It was not like those players left T1 to join Envy or anything like that. They actually were booted off or left T1. And then Envy said, hey, these players have left this team. We're actually going to go ahead and sign the T1 duo of Food and Crashies, which is pretty interesting, because Crashies and Food, obviously T1 had their own problems, with being a pretty passive team, and they couldn't really figure out the roles themselves, etc. But now Envy, they get rid of Calypso and Akis, and they bring in Food and Crashies, which sort of introduces this new dilemma with the roles once more. So the team that we thought was really structured and organized and did improve going into Pop Clash, now going into First Strike, this is a team that has to figure out their new roles, actually, and we don't really know what to expect. We don't know what roles these players are going to play off, and we don't have any information because they haven't played since Pop Clash either. Yeah. So, a lot of things in the air for this team.
There definitely are. Now, there has been some information out there that Food is going to move over to the Smoker role and play Omen instead of Calypso. Food is a player that used to be the duelist player for T1, and he would put up really big numbers against the lower level teams, and then he would struggle against the top level teams. He would play spots where he couldn't really be traded effectively, and although that works really well against bad teams, it didn't really work against the top level. He was also about the only aggressive component on an otherwise very passive team, so no one even wanted to go and go aggressive with him. His style just didn't mesh with the team. Not 100% his fault, but some of the tendencies were not kind of tier 1 game sense tendencies. Now, him moving over to the Omen, though, he's not going to be able to play like that. He can't play like that. And so that's going to be a whole redesign of his style. We don't even know what style he's going to play. You literally can't play the Smoker by hiding in a suicide angle and hoping you get a couple of kills as they come through. It's not a viable strat at all. You can't even play that aggressive on some of the smokers. It's more of a supportive role, flashing other people in, that kind of stuff. So it's that is very much up in the air, even though we have an idea of what he's going to play. We don't know what style he's going to play at all. And Crashies was the Cypher for a long time for T1. He looked really good on the Cypher. I thought he was going to be, if he was actually on a better team, one of the better Cyphers in North America. And he did have a period of time playing duelist for T1. It was a messy kind of blow up of the roles. Everyone was trying everything over at T1, and Crashies did have a small amount of time playing duelist for them. I don't think that's going to happen though, because Mumei and Caboose are their Jett and Phoenix kind of players. They're the kind of spearhead of this team. So what the heck is Crashy's going to play? What the heck is FNS going to play? Because now they have 2 Cypher players on their team, and they've really got to find one for the Cypher and one for the Breach and the Sova and the other kind of semi-supportive role. It seems to be a bit of a dilemma here that I don't know what the solution is. I don't even know which player I would pick up for which role. FNS is the IGL. That's normally better on the Sova and Breach, but that doesn't mean that he can play those agents better than Crashy's can.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if perhaps FNS moves over to that Sova role, because crucially, as you mentioned as well, Crashy's known as a great Cypher, played for T1 of course, but then FNS as well. FNS had some of his best performances in Pop Flash, playing the Cypher as well. He had figured out how to flank and lurk properly in the right timings to get some nice impact as well. Statistically speaking, you know, he is the shot caller of the team, so he's not going to be up there, but he still averages 118 ADR. He has 0.9 KD, which is better than some shot callers, of course, in the scene. So FNS had some of his better performances on the Cypher role. Now, you might not fully agree here, but some shot callers have started to transition into the Sova role. And as well, we have Shazam, who has input on Sentinels as well. He's played some of the Breach in the past for Sentinels as well. Yeah, Daze plays the Sova now for T1 as well. So the shot callers have moved over to... There you go. You could just list them off because you know everyone in the scene. You know everything. You are the oracle of this scene. But yeah, it would be interesting to see if... Do you value now Crashy's and the impact he had on the Cypher while playing on T1? Obviously, we've praised him a ton here. And have FNS perhaps move over to that Sova role? Because I think it would perhaps be a mistake to mess around with what we know that Crashy's is already capable of on this Cypher role.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I really do believe in Crashy's on the Cypher role. Considering how poor T1 were when Crashy's was playing that Cypher, at least with the majority of the time, there were some moments where T1 were getting good results, but I mean, you can see a lot of losses here when you look at his recent matches. And the fact that he's still got 0.81 KPR and a KD of 1.23, and when you watch him in the game, you can see how these kills happen. He's breaking open certain areas of the map, and he's very effective on lurks. And if he lurks and he meets somebody else, even if he's not favored in the duel, he's still got enough skill to be able to beat them. And then when you have a player that is very high in terms of their mechanics, who's going on those solo lurks, and you can count on them, even if they run into trouble, to actually give your team the favor, that is a crucially powerful position, because you can let that guy do his own thing and be confident that he isn't going to be a burden and he's not going to like lose that area of the map. That's how I feel about Crashy's. I felt very strongly about the guy's potential on Cypher. That might open up to a bunch of different heroes as well, but I would tend to agree with you that in an ideal world, if FNS can handle it, moving him over to the Sova and to play the Breach on maps where you don't run the Sova, that seems to me to be the way forward for Envy.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, maybe it's time to talk about the duelists, because I think that this is a pretty interesting conversation to have as well, because we know in North America, there's so many great duelists up and coming, especially on Immortals that we'll talk about in another video, which you should check out as well. There are a lot of great duelists emerging in the North American scene, but this team as well, Caboose and Mumei play for this team. So Caboose is going to be your Race and Phoenix, and he had a really impressive showing in Pop Flash.
Yeah, exceptional performance in Pop Flash, actually. He went from being a player that you thought was like, he was all right, you know, he's a pretty decent duelist. In Pop Flash, he went above and beyond. He had some nutty moments, truly. It was his breakout tournament, and it's a pity that we haven't seen him since then.
Yeah, absolutely. So now 135 ADR, 0.14 first blood per round. You know, I'm just listing off these stats as like basketball statistics because, you know, sometimes they're just pretty average. But if you see the outliers, we're actually pulling stats from 2 different websites. So this is going to be wonderful for the video when they're going to compare. But yes, Caboose statistically, it doesn't even like show how good he really performed in that Pop Flash tournament, because obviously we're listing out the averages. But as you said, in Pop Flash, he had some of his best gameplay to date. And now, can someone like Caboose match up with some of the better duelists in these top teams? Because if I am Envy now, we've established ourselves as a tier 2 scene, or a tier 2 team, sorry. You've beaten the likes of Cloud9, who, you know, perhaps struggled a little bit in the Renegades tournament as well, that led into this first strike qualification rounds. And now Caboose, can he compete with some of these top tier teams? Because that is really what you're looking at. If you become a fan of Envy, you're looking at taking on some of these top teams like TSM and Sentinels. And can you really stand out as one of these top teams? Do you think that someone like Caboose and Mumei, they have what it takes to challenge some of these top teams in North America?
I think it's possible. I mean, when I look at Caboose, if he can keep up the performance that he had at the end of Pop Flash, then it really is possible. But if he goes back to where he was in the past, then at that point I'm starting to worry a little bit. I would say that for Mame, what's interesting about him is that he was a very heavy Jett opper, and both the Jett and the op have been nerfed recently, and Envy were the kind of team to try and rely on Mame to be using Jett op on attack as well, and that specific playstyle has been nerfed even more because you can't go for these aggressive peaks with the op. So I'm almost interested I haven't really thought about this too much, but look, this was the moment from Caboose. Absolutely insane 3K there.
That was the play of the tournament.
Just so crisp with his aim. And this is the kind of play that you wouldn't have previously expected from Caboose. And he just demolishes with a 4K. It makes it look like it's an aim training map. So I had to show that. But what interests me about Mummy that I'm going to bring up here is that he's played 22 maps of Sova. And so the Sova was normally the agent that you would go to if you wanted to play more of a utility-based style. So the meta previously, he would play it on Bind, where they don't want to get value out of the Jett. Instead, they want maybe the Raze or the Phoenix to play alongside the Sova. And Mame would still op from that position, but a more of a passive op. You're not always getting in these crazy aggressive angles and dashing away. You're getting in some forward angles, but where you still have cover to be able to retreat to. And Mame was still pretty good there. It's like the stats are a little lower than when he plays the Jett, as you would expect, because it's a bit more of a supportive role and you can't quite get away with murder in the same sense. But he's still putting up pretty good performances. What I'm wondering is whether they try and keep FNS on the Cypher, keep Mame on his role with the op, but instead transition him to Sova, and have Crashies play the duelist like he did for a small amount of time in T1. That to me would mitigate some of the problems with Mame's Jett orping, and I don't think there were many problems with it when we watched them, but there are potential problems because of the nerfs that have come in, and the style that he played. And so that is another option that they could have been scrimming all sorts of different stuff that we would be unaware of. These are the main things I'm thinking about with Caboose and Mame.
And so this is why this preview is sort of annoying to record at this moment in time.
Yeah.
It's because when I'm trying to lay out the arguments for like, why should you be a fan of Envy? You know, you're going into First Strike. Perhaps you don't know all the teams that are currently playing and participating in the North American scene. I would tell you that while we have so many like hype beast organizations, there's so much hype, you know, social media trash talk, all that. I feel like Envy is one of the more grounded and mature teams in the scene, arguably. You know, they have players like FNS, who has a history in Counter-Strike Go as well. If you followed the CSGO, you would know of him. If you perhaps followed Overwatch even, you would know of Tailspin, who is the general manager for this team. He used to play for Envy himself. You know, that's a bit of a storyline. So if you were a fan of Envy in Overwatch, you should perhaps be a fan of Envy here in Valorant here as well. But now they had this structure, identity, which I really liked. They were grounded on all that. And now, as you just laid out as well, they have all of these role issues to really figure out going into First Strike, which is annoying because while we could have incredible highs, you know, integrating Crashies into the lineup, Caboose having sick performances in the qualifiers, and we're just like, wow, Envy really establishing themselves as a top team. They could also entirely just fall flat, you know, not figure out the roles at all, look lost, not confident in their play whatsoever. So if I was trying to become a fan of Envy, I would perhaps settle my expectations, even though they did play great in the Pop Flash tournament and all of that, and they had good performance all around. Be a bit grounded, you know, in your expectations for this team. But if they come out and they actually look quite crisp and really good, this is a solid team to root for. I don't think they're going to oscillate too much in their performances if they come out and look good in the first stages of the First Strike tournament. This is a solid team to root for in my mind, because as I said, they're a bit more mature than the other teams, and they have a solid kind of fundamental approach to the game as well.
Yeah, if you like rooting for a team that's on the grind upwards and is like punching above their weight, they're the underdog that's going to rise up. If you're a fan of those kind of teams instead of the people who are already on top, if you're picking between like a Sentinels and an Envy, for example, Envy is definitely the team that still has something to prove, that's still trying to get these deep placings in the tournaments, that's still trying to hang with the big dogs, but has shown, at least in the past with their former 5-man roster, an ability to do so. So there's one reason why you might be a fan of Envy. The other reason is something that you talked about previously, FNS's history in CS. And he was known as the mastermind in CS because all of these memes were created about FNS and like the way that his opposing teams fell to pieces, and it was all orchestrated by the puppet master FNS, who would always come up with some like crazy conspiracy theory for why FNS was the big brain behind it all. And that's also like a tongue-in-cheek meme referring back to his abilities as an IGL as well. And he's really taken to Valorant. He seems like a good IGL, a pretty good cypher that's going to be able to give you some results in certain rounds, some crucial rounds. And so you might be maybe a fan of FNS that knows about this meme from CSGO. You also might be a T1 fan that hates the fact that Food and Crashies got kind of screwed over, and you're rooting for a redemption story there. Because if you're a T1 fan that doesn't really like how these new guys were treated and kicked out of the team for the old blood, well, fuck me, this is the redemption story right here, baby, isn't it? Because if Envy come out and they end up battering T1, well then, Food and Crashies, you're rolling in it, aren't you? Yeah. Oh, what was that? I Buy Power? What were you, some kind of NA super team? What was that in the past? Was that in the Stone Age, Grandpa? Goodbye. Like that. This is the kind of stuff that Food and Crashies are going to be thinking of themselves, even if they don't end up tweeting it. But you'll know it. You'll know it as a fan.
Yeah, you've really laid it out there. I think that there are like a lot of good arguments to actually root for Envy in this scenario, and you're really just hoping that they do not fall flat with these new role changes coming to mind. But I think there are a lot of good reasons to cheer for this team. I think they're consistent. I do not think that Envy is going to be one of those teams that just drop off as soon as the quality of play increases. You know, we have some teams in the scene that, you know, of course we're not going to name because we're good boys and we're friendly and all that. We're trying to make networking contacts and all that stuff. We're not going to name them. But I don't think Envy is one of those teams that will just rapidly drop off and be like, oh, we cannot adapt. We don't have the mindset for it. We don't have the brains, you know, where we're just an early riser in the scene. I don't think that is Envy at all. I think Envy will consistently be a good team within the scene. The question is, can they figure out the roles appropriately and perhaps expand their playbook a little bit with FNS smarts? I think that is going to be the big question for Envy moving into First Strike.
Yeah, a lot of questions for this team, but that means a lot of excitement, a lot of answers as well when we move into First Strike. Yeah, I think this is a really cool team to root for. They've been fun to watch previously. Watch out for them on Split. They're incredibly dangerous, or at least they were with their prior 5-man roster. Who knows what's going on now? Drop us a comment below about what you love most about Team Envy, or whether you're rooting for them or against them. And watch out for our next First Strike preview videos coming up. We're going to have ones on Immortals and on Cloud9, I think, has already come out previously. There's just a bunch of NA teams. All of the teams as we lead up to as we lead up to First Strike. Yeah, like and subscribe to the video. It helps us out, and you'll be notified on all future videos that we release on the Plat Valorant channel. Check out the podcast that happens every week, and we'll see you guys later.